Good evening and welcome back. Please join us for celebrating Agatha Christie, the author and grandmother Manjiri Prabhu, in conversation with Mathew Prichard, Agatha Christie's grandson. Mathew Prichard. Mathew Prichard is Agatha Christie's only grandson, being Agatha's only daughter Rosalind's only son. He will be 80 years young in 2023. He was educated at Oxford University in the 1960s, and following that, he was chairman of Agatha Christie Limited, which distributes and licenses Agatha Christie books, films, TV, and plays until his retirement in 2015. He now lives in Wales with his wife, Lucy. Dr. Manjiri Prabhu holds a doctorate in communication science and is a short filmmaker, an award winning international author, and also the founder director of two international festivals. She has directed over 200 children's TV programs, more than 50 short fiction and travel films, and has authored 19 books. Manjiri has been acknowledged as a pioneer in India among women writers of mystery fiction, and she has a diverse global fan following. She is a dedicated animal welfare activist since decades. This has culminated into her latest research oriented nonfiction book, The Doctrine of Peace. We are all eagerly waiting to hear the inspiring Mathew Prichard. The discussion will be led by Manjiri Prabhu, and I request her to begin this exciting conversation.
And Matthew Prichard, welcome to the Pune International Literary Festival. It is such a pleasure to have you here, and you have no idea how grateful I am to you, and it's such a privilege. Uh, you know, uh, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Yes, yes. So Matthew, I know the entire world almost loves Agatha Christie. I love her. I have always considered her my spirit mentor. She actually taught me the craft of writing mysteries. I learned so much from her, and to meet you today is really such a privilege. So thank you for coming to PILF, even if it's online. Thank you so much.
Not at all. Can I just make one overall apology? I have a terrible cough and cold, and if I break out coughing or sneezing, I may just have to break off for a moment. But I won't apologize again. We'll just get on with it.
Absolutely. Just be comfortable, and even if you do cough, it's fine with us. So Matthew, the world looks at Agatha as a queen of crime, but she is your grandmother. So, what is it to be the grandson of the greatest mystery writer in the world? What's this? How do you react to it when everyone looks at you as a grandchild, and what does it feel like, this emotion?
Well, most of the time it doesn't. I mean, I have my own life to live, and I had one lovely wife who sadly died of cancer nearly 10 years ago. I now have another lovely wife, and up until a couple of months ago, I had a lovely dog as well, which would have been something to share with my grandmother. But I think that most of all, the word that springs to mind is that it was a great privilege to be a member of the family, and what is more, one who had a great deal to do with her work and her books and television and all that kind of thing. And I mean, we always set out as a family to have it existing as a family orientated business for as long as possible. And I'm happy to say that although I retired 6 or 7 years ago, my son took over from me, so the tradition continues. But I think all the family share the same feelings of privilege to be associated with such a wonderful person. I mean, I sometimes lie awake at night, sort of trying to count up the number of true geniuses who I have come across with seriously in my life, and she's certainly at the top of the list.
I agree, absolutely. I always say that everything that has to be done in mystery writing has already been done by her, and all the other writers in the world are trying to re-originate what she's already done. So honestly, she's a legend and she's a genius. But
Yeah.
but when you think of her as a writer, in the world out there, and you as a grandson, what kind of a relationship did you really have with her? I know that you were 8 years old, and but you must have some initial memories of. We would love to hear them.
Well, I have one which is perhaps a bit vague, but I have a feeling our viewers might understand it. I mean, you probably know that when I was born, that was shortly after my father, my mother's husband, obviously, was killed in the Second World War. And I was therefore not only short of a father, but my other grandfather had divorced my grandmother many years before, so I didn't have him. My second grandfather died before I was born, and I had another grandmother who I did see, who lived close to us here in Wales. But I think the first thing I remember is the feeling of my grandmother used to come down and see her daughter, my mother Rosalind, frequently during the period when she was on her own. And there was always a warm and happy atmosphere in the house when she was there. My mother was pleased to see her and welcomed the help she gave her. And, on a graph of 0 to 10, when my mother was on her own looking after me, it was probably 5 or 6. But when my grandmother was there, it moved up probably to 7 or 8. And when you're quite a small little boy, the difference between 5 to 6 and 7 to 8 in a sort of happiness value is very noticeable. And that is probably the first thing I knew about. By the way, I better say this straight away. I used to call my grandmother Nima, which is, I suppose, a first attempt at grandma. You may say it's a pretty bad attempt, but that was what I knew her for all the time I knew her, until the time she died. It seemed rather inappropriate, but all the other family members used it as well when I was there.
Yeah. So, when I look at it, you were 8 years old when when all this was happening, and I think probably she describes you very well in what she really thought of you in her autobiography, and I'm going to read from it. An enchanting little boy, he had a great knack for happiness. And what there's something else that she says, the one virtue that would never quench for me is hope. That is where I have always found my dear Matthew such a rewarding person to be with. He has always had an incurably optimistic temperament. I mean, these are very sweet words, for a grandmother to say and to give it out into the public. What do you think about this? I mean, how does it make you feel?
Well, I suppose I don't know what it's like in India, but you have to be a very, very hopeful and optimistic person to feel very hopeful or optimistic about our future at the moment. What with Ukraine, various disasters of a climatic kind, and everything that are said to be threatening us. And I still think I am perhaps slightly less optimistic person than I was when my grandmother wrote that. But nevertheless, still optimistic, and I still believe in the ability of the human race to slowly but surely cure the problems that beset us at the moment. I think I'm perhaps in the minority, but I do still believe in that, and I hope that if we were doing this in 10 years' time, that my grandchildren would be living in a better world than they are now. But it will be very hard work, and I think that for me to live up to those very kind words from my grandmother in 2022 would be a big effort on my part, but I would do my best.
And I'm sure she's very proud of you, because I think she saw that spark in you when she wrote those words. She saw it in you at a very young age, that optimism and hope in you. And she kind of, I think she got very influenced by it. Mathew, this is a very personal question, and I know you may not answer it also, but do you regret the fact that you didn't have enough time with her? Maybe you could have some more years. Do you feel that always, that you miss her?
I think one of the great, and I'd say this even if Nima was with us, I think one of the great advantages of grandparents is that they aren't with you all the time. And although many people, including me, sort of wished when Nima, we either left her from Greenway in Devon or she left us in Wales, it was a sad moment. But I think we recognised that my life was with my mother to start with, and then with my mother and my stepfather, who, by the way, I was very fond of. But my grandmother came when she could. She spent long periods of her time in Iraq during my early childhood, and there's nothing we could do about that. But I think that my feelings were that we were terribly happy when she was around, and we certainly spent a lot of time with her when we were together, and we just had to make do with that. And I'm sure she wished she spent a bit more time with the family, but when I was around, she had her archaeology to think with. Of course, she had writing and all that kind of thing. So, we couldn't have any more time than she gave us, and she was very generous with the time she gave us.
Right. And do you have any special memory, something that you would, will bring joy into life? Do you have a kind of a storehouse of memories of her that you bring up when you're feeling particularly down or low? Is there something that connects you especially to her?
Well, I suppose one of the first, I went away to boarding school when I was probably 8. And the boarding school very sensibly had a rule that if you had books sent to you to read from home, they had to go to the headmaster first to be signed to confirm that they were suitable reading material. And it dawned on me after a bit that my books took a lot longer to go through this process than other people's. And it sort of, I didn't really think my grandmother wrote, unacceptable material. So I wondered, what the reason was. And it wasn't until I actually left the school 4 or 5 years later that the headmaster's wife, a charming lady called Mrs. Sanderson, had taken the opportunity to read the new book before sending it back to me, which obviously took a week or two. And that was, I think, the first time that I really realized that Nima wrote books that were actually worth reading by other people, including, to me then, important people like the headmaster's wife. And that was perhaps the first penny that dropped, that I had somebody really notable in the family.
Special. Yeah, quite a discovery at a young age. But I don't know if you do you have have you carried the writing gene in you? I mean, do you have it in you?
I always say to people that the only gene I have in me is the ability to write one sheet of A4. When I get on the second sheet, I tend to waffle, and nobody could accuse me of that. But I can do sort of simple. How can I put it? Writing down of thoughts and business things, but I have not the half of her patience or imagination, or maybe I have a little bit of her imagination, but certainly not the patience to write to the enormous extent that she did. and particularly during the war, which was admittedly just before I was born, but the concentration needed for writing the amount of books that she did, whilst everything all was going on around her, and Her son-in-law was fighting in the war, and it was an amazing achievement.
I think she was an amazing woman and so ahead of her times. I mean, of course, when I look at the pictures, I see her life through pictures and what I read on the net, and I see her doing several things, you know, and I feel that probably for me, I think that for a time she was really ahead of her times as a woman. But I'm always curious to know, she's written so many books. What was her writing process? Did you ever read her first drafts? Did she write what she was writing?
Sorry, Manjiri,
Right.
you're breaking up. I didn't hear the
Yes.
last.
Okay, so I said that, you know, I'm very curious to know how she was when she was actually writing. And how she was. Did she read out her first drafts to you? Would she narrate her story to you and share her thoughts and ideas with you? Did that ever happen?
Well, there are two answers to that question. The first is that nobody in their right mind attempts to write a book with a 6, 7, 8 to 12 or whatever grandson yapping at your heels, because it would be a distraction. And therefore, I can honestly tell you that not only between 6 and 12, but during the whole of my life, I never witnessed for any length of time Nima writing or having physically sitting at a desk with, in latter days, a dog beneath the desk. But what did happen when we went down to Greenway in Devon for the summer, she occasionally used to read the latest book to all the family sitting round the room after supper in the evening. And that was, I suppose, a form of what's the word? Test case for a possible audience to see that there weren't too many errors and things like that. That happened, but not for me personally. That was all the family.
Yeah, that makes a very charming picture. Lovely, because I've been green and I loved it. I mean, I'm sure thousands of people tell you that, but it is a very special place. And I remember I sat by the chair. They told me sit in this chair by the fireplace, the armchair, and we weren't allowed to touch. But I took a quick selfie and I touched it, and the lady who was watching me quietly looked away and allowed me to take a picture and kind of touch the chair. So yeah, it was lovely to be in Greenway. But you know, I saw when I went there, I saw her typewriter, and then I saw Peter the dog, and you know, pictures. And one thing I felt very strongly, you know, where I've always felt this connect with Agatha Christie is that she loved dogs so much. And I want you to tell me, if possible, how. I mean, I know that she had this little one. George Washington was her first dog. I put that little incident in my book, The Doctrine of Peace. But can you share with me her love for dogs and what it meant to have dogs in her life? What was it like for her?
Well, I will tell you, the first dog, I think it was the first dog that she had, or no, I don't think it was the first dog she had, because the first dog was long before my time. But I think her favorite dog was a dog called Peter, who you mentioned just now, and he was around in the 1930s. And he does receive an acknowledgement on the face piece of a book called Dumb Witness, in which she gives it the credit of being, to Peter, the most magnificent dog in the world, or something like that. So that was the first one. And the others I remember very well, two Manchester Terriers who were around when I was a child. One called Treacle, who actually used to be my dog, but had to be exiled from home because he was unpleasant to my mother's little Shih Tzus. and the other was the infamous Bingo, who spent the sort of last years of Nima's life with her, was given to her by my mother, and was actually, though I have to say it myself, Manjiri, quite an unpleasant little dog and bit everybody. But he was nevertheless, in common with all other dogs in my family, he was much loved, and it was a great comfort to my grandmother when she wasn't very well. But
would you like to take a sip of some coffee? Would you like to take some coffee? Yes.
Glass of water.
Yes.
But in the between period, between sort of Peter and Treacle and Bingo, on the whole, my mother shared dogs around in the family, whether it be me or when Nima was there. And anyway, during the war, it wasn't very sensible to have dogs. I don't remember, and as Nima was away for such a long period of her time in Iraq, I don't think she actually owned dogs of her own for quite a long time before Treacle went to see her, so to speak. But but they were certainly a shared love of all the family. Until a couple of months ago, I had a very loved dog called Mahler, after the German music composer. He sadly died a couple of months ago. We're going to get another one, but not until after Christmas. But anyway, that is certainly something I shared with Nima, and we really loved our dogs.
I've seen the videos on YouTube, and the black and white videos where she's walking the dog and you are walking your dog and talking about Nima. It's really very heartwarming to see all that.
Yes.
I really think you were lucky to have her as your grandmother. I mean, she was a great woman, and I'm not just saying this because Agatha Christie is somebody whom everybody aspires to be, but I also feel that I think she gave you a legacy which you're upholding, and it's not an easy legacy to uphold, I would say. I mean, you've carried forward everything in your own way. You've literally kept her alive in all our lives and in the future generations to come. I think that's brilliant, and I think she will really appreciate it, because I know that writers are so, how should I say, somewhere on the last rung when it comes to creativity. So I think it's brilliant what you're doing to keep her name. She's written great books, but you've been a brilliant grandson to keep all her books alive and her legacy alive. I think she'd be very proud of you. So that's my personal comment. But she gave you, I think, the mousetrap rights when you were only 9 years old. And I think what she said was that among other things, the success for the long run is like the longest running play is 90% luck, but also the fact that you were the lucky one in the family, and that is why she gave you the rights of mousetrap. Is that right?
Well, I'll accept 10% of the benefit, which is what that phrase implies. But I think that that is a serious. I mean, you've left out all the people who produced the play, acted in it, all the people who involved the success of the Mousetrap, including Richard Attenborough, who was the first leading actor, his wife Sheila Sim, and countless other names, some of whom we met last week actually for the 70th anniversary. The Mousetrap has been very fortunate with the people who it's had to keep it along the straight and narrow, and we attended the 70th anniversary last week, which was a memorable event. But it is true, in order for something to last that long, you have to be lucky. I actually believe in that, and if my association with it helped it be a little bit luckier than it would otherwise have been, then I accept the compliment gratefully.
So earlier when you mentioned that when you were young and the books that went for approval came back very late to you, would that be one of the prouder moments of being Agatha Christie's grandson, or is it a proud moment, a moment when you felt, wow, this is something amazing? Is there such a moment? I mean, there must be many, I'm sure, but is there something that really comes up in your mind?
Well, that was, I mean,
A very proud moment. Yeah.
All the success the Mousetrap has had, which it has had, regularly at various anniversaries for the last 70 years. They sort of add up to a huge moment of proudness in my life where she is concerned. Another one which happened when I was quite young was the publication of her 50th book, which was A Murder is Announced, a Miss Marple story. And that was published, I think, in 1950 or around there. And I mean, I was just about at school then, if not quite. But there was a lot of publicity about that. Cakes were cut and all that kind of thing. And that was another moment when I sort of went to bed at night and thought, well, Nima is really quite an important person. And next, I suppose, the famous moment when Murder on the Orient Express was released as a film in the presence of Her Majesty the Queen. I think it was in 1973. That was the first time Agatha Christie and big time movie with Hollywood connections actually met. And
you can drink some water if you like. Yeah.
And happily, I didn't have any personal association with that apart from being chairman of Agatha Christie Limited. Actually, I don't think I was, because my grandmother was still alive. But I did have a little to do with the preparation of the film, but nothing really. And of course, it was a huge success. And I don't think the film industry or Agatha Christie was ever quite the same again. And that was the moment when she realized that actually her books could be translated into a visual image. And it was, since then, we've had countless television films and the odd proper movie. But now probably it's all going to change again. But that was a milestone too, and one on which I was very proud.
There's a question that we can take right now. It's from Mr. Bharat. 1 second, I'll show you. The question is, who were Agatha Christie's favorite authors and or characters that she spoke about? Would you kind of can throw some light on this? Who were her favorite characters? No, who were her favorite authors and or characters that she spoke about?
I could do a few favorite authors, but they're very obvious. I mean, Charles Dickens was one of them. Conan Doyle was another. And I'm not a good enough Dickens reader to, but I mean, all the obvious Dickens characters and Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. I mean, they were, but I think, those were two of them, and her fellow authors like Dorothy Sayers and who wrote at the same time that she was. She read everything, but I think the most accurate answer to that question is the most remarkable thing about Nima was how much she read. She read everything. She had little paper parcels of books that came down to her from the shop Harrods in London, a dozen at a time, and it took her about a fortnight to read them, and then she packed them up in brown paper again, sent them back. She read absolutely everything, and I think that was one of the reasons for her success, that she didn't really have huge favorites, but she just read everything, and she never had a really cruel word to say about any of her fellow authors.
Oh, that's nice. That's remarkable. So before I see if there are more questions, but if we take any other questions from anyone else, I want to ask you this. I know you've done a lot to keep her name, her name alive in the world with her books and television serials and new productions. Is there anything you feel you could have done more? Is there something you felt, I wish I had done this for her?
Well, you asked me, Manjiri, to tell you something that I don't think I probably ever told anybody else. There is one thing that I still have to achieve before, somebody takes me away. I would love there to be a film of a short story Nima wrote called The Man from the Sea, which is not a Parker Pine, but the other chap. Can't remember the name now. It must be my cough. But The Man from the Sea is a brilliant little story. It has no major character. It doesn't have Poirot or Miss Marple in it, but it is a brilliantly evocative little story. And nobody has yet made a film of that. And I would love that to happen while I'm still here to see it.
Oh, I'm sure it'll happen. I give it my blessings, if that counts at all. I will pray that it happens. So there's another question here, which I would love to take. It's from Bipin Chandra Sogli, my husband, in fact. Did you find, one second, did you find any of her characters very much resembling with anyone in your extended family or people around her and you? So did she take inspiration from her family members or people around her and friends?
Well, the answer is almost never, because she realized the difficulties of putting people into books and then, either them being the murderer or being murdered or having some part. But what she did do is she put little characteristics that various people had and used them as plot assistance. I mean, for instance, in The Mousetrap, one of the characters is identified by the fact that he twisted his hair like that, which was a personal characteristic that my stepfather, Anthony Hicks, had, and which drove my mother absolutely wild because it was a compulsive habit. But that appears in The Mousetrap. But I mean, the rest of my stepfather, unfortunately, doesn't. But that's one. There is the famous. I won't spoil your viewers. There's a famous one in the Man in the Brown Suit, who probably is what is it? The reincarnation of somebody who she knew at that time. But one thing I would like to say under this is that, as you know, Nima wrote a number of books under the name of Mary Westmacott. They're not detective stories. They are sort of, I don't know exactly quite how you describe them, as sort of vaguely romances and things like that. Quite a few of them are autobiographically inclined, so that they sort of Nima's way of sort of setting out various parts of her life without actually saying that she's doing so. And I think those are vaguely. I mean, the most obvious one is a book called A Daughter's a Daughter, which you can easily recognize my grandmother and my mother in that story, although it was more than your life was worth to tell either of them that that's what it was. But the several biographies have sort of. I mean, she's been rumbled now, but I don't think she was rumbled when she wrote them. And it gave her, I think, a sense of relaxation about certain unhappy parts of her life. and it enabled her to get on with her life.
Right. So one other question that comes to my mind right now is that she was so widely traveled, and she based so many books there, but she never came to India. And it's, for me personally, that's a regret. Do you ever feel that she should have come to India and based a book here?
Well, she did go to India once, but very quietly. I know that because she went on the way back. We had a family Christmas holiday to Sri Lanka, or Ceylon as it was called then.
Okay.
And on the way home, I went straight home from Ceylon to the UK, and my grandmother spent some time in India. I think it was around Bombay, but I'm not absolutely sure. I think she visited, some sites in India and things like that. But it was very quiet with her husband, and I think my parents went with her too. But as far as I know, that was the only time. And I think you will find that if she had been going to write a story about India, she would have had to spend a lot more time in your lovely country than she had time for spending time at all the places that she loved going to.
It's a pity there's no story based, because it's so hugely popular in India, and we take the stories, we turn them into Hindi films, and now all the films are going to be turned into Hindi films. So if there had been a story, it was great. Maybe if you're going to commission it to somebody, do commission it to me, and I will write a story of Hercule Poirot coming to India and writing a story here. If I think that's an incomplete, for me, it's an incomplete thing which needs to be filled somehow. So I would love to do that if I can in the future. Matthew,
if I tell you,
let me just check. Yes.
If I tell you, Manjiri, that you're not the only one, you will no doubt believe me.
Of course I will. I'm sure there are hundreds of offers, but I will probably end up doing it though. So I don't know about the 100 offers, but I may just do it. So let me just check if there are any more questions. No. Okay. So Matthew, I think we can stop here. I know that you're not too well, and I don't want to, we can go on talking, and I can go on talking about Agatha Christie forever, honestly. It's really wonderful of you to, come here and talk when you're not fully up to mark. And I really am honored that you're here. And I hope that all that you wished for Agatha Christie, all that you want to do for her comes true, including the film or whatever you want to do on the book, will also come true. And I hope that one day you can visit India, maybe PILF in person, like we've been trying to get you here, or I come and I meet you again, either of the two things. So thank you so much, very much.
Not at all.
Do you have any last message to give out to the aspiring writers? Do you have anything to tell them out there who want to be like Agatha Christie? Do you want to tell them something?
Well, I do have something. I have, as you know, Jerry, I have spent a good deal of my life involved in the business affairs of Nima, as well as as a grandmother, and and as well as that, and sometimes I found myself getting so wound up with the business that I was tending to forget that the person we were arguing about, or or talking about, was actually Nima, my grandmother. And one of your questions here, which you haven't asked me, is Agatha Christie, grandmother or writer? And the answer is emphatically grandmother.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Yes. And
yes, please do answer that. I did have it, but I just thought that I didn't want to trouble you anymore, so I was going to stop. But if you would answer that, that would be great. Yeah.
Well, it was undoubtedly grandmother, and I think that what I constantly don't actually have to remind myself, but I like to remind other people, is that, you know, even now, some, whatever it is, nearly 50 years after she died, I still miss her. I still wake up in the morning sometimes thinking, I wonder what she would have thought or done about this. And of all people that that I have known and loved, I think that sometimes she would have had the right answer, which nobody else has yet provided. Certainly in my life, that I'm sure is true. But she was a very wonderful person, and a huge benefit to have as a member of my family, and I'm very proud of it.
I can really understand that feeling. She has a very powerful presence in your life, and she has blessed you with love and her legacy. Thank you, Matthew. It's really wonderful talking to you. And do take care of yourself, and I hope to see you one day soon.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking to you, Manjiri.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Pleasure, always.
This was a Mathew Prichard for being an eminent PILF guest and our founder director, Dr. Manjiri Prabhu. Our next session begins at 6:30 p.m. Our most awaited session today, The Many Paths to Mental Strength. Bharat Bhushan in conversation with Vasudev Murthy, Yoga Sutras Simplified, and Kolbi Sharma, The Curveball. We thank our title sponsor, Vishwakarma Publications, Silver Partner State Bank of India, Bronze Partner Bajaj Allianz, and our bookstore partner, Crossword. Thank you.